Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the big show. The big show we do every single day. Well, not every day, but we will do every day soon in July, as soon as training camp starts. But for right now, we're going to do a couple a week. We've got Matt Bensel coming in a little bit later to talk about the Steelers. And we've got a number of other things that we are going to get into today with the Steelers. One of the things that's interesting about the Steelers is that they certainly are not trying to get younger. And I think one of the things that's amazing is if you think about their roster right now, if my math is correct, and I think it is, by adding the two guys that they added yesterday, Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey, one is 30, and let's essentially say the other one is 30 as well. You're basically now to the point where you have 14 guys who are 30 years old or older on this roster. Now, again, I'm not somebody who basically says, you know what, we are going to have to basically, blow it all up because they're too old. I mean, we've seen some teams that are old win in the past. Obviously, I think that Buccaneers team, I bet you if you went back and looked at that roster with Tom Brady, they had a number of guys who were, at least if they weren't old, they were sort of near the end of their careers. The Rams team with Matthew Stafford wasn't, bludgeoned with a bunch of young guys either. And sometimes teams that are built like that, I mean, if you think about it, they basically look at it like this. They're trying to win now. So I think that's where we get to a point in my mind where you look at this roster and say, okay, who are the old guys and how much can they still contribute? And I think that's something we'll look at right now, just because, like I said, I kind of wanted them to try actually to get a little bit younger. Maybe try and go out and find some guys that are in their, mid-20s, maybe a little bit later than that, so that they have a little bit of experience. And I kind of was of the opinion that maybe they should trade a couple of their guys for draft picks before the draft so that they would be able to add to their roster. But if you look at age, okay, let's go through it here. The obvious one is Aaron Rodgers. I don't know how much more we could talk about Aaron Rodgers. In fact, I just can't wait till the season starts because I'm tired of talking about him. But it's a very, very good question to ask. How much does he still have left in the tank? How much does he still have left in the tank? And I think that's really, to me, what I would tell you is going to be a question that we ask a lot this year. Even if he gets out of the gate and plays well early, at 41 years old, he's going to be 42 in December. It's fair to say, does he have much left to really give? Cordarrelle Patterson, I don't think is relevant enough to worry about, but he's 34 years old. I'm talking about the guys they're going to be counting on to do something special or do something, important. Robert Woods, 33 years old. He's a receiver who, is going to be on the depth chart as maybe the second, well, probably the third receiver or something like that. So he's going to be a big part of the rotation, but I don't know at 33 years old if he gives them a whole lot more left. I just think that he's a guy who probably is a veteran. He can be somewhat productive on some level, but maybe not. Isaac Seumalo is still one of their best players, even at age 31, so I don't have a problem with him. I think he showed last year he can be really good, and he's not slowing down anytime soon. Daniel, I can't say the guy's last name. I never could. Ikwalele or whatever the hell his name is, 31 years old. Again, he's just a guy that doesn't matter. He's sort of a plugger that doesn't really matter. Dean Lowry is a guy that doesn't really matter. He's a plugger as well. But then you get to T.J. Watt, who is 30 years old. And my thing about T.J. Watt has been, I feel like he always is at a place every single year these days where he is probably beat up at the end of the year. He's probably at a place where I think that he wears down and becomes basically, I would say, ineffective. Part of it too is because I think when they play in the playoffs, teams sort of know how to make sure that they can that they can block him the right way and do what they have to do to protect on the backside. But to me, I think he gets worn down and he gets beat up, and that's the biggest thing, So I feel like T.J. Watt's age is probably going to be an issue. I know that that's probably not a very popular opinion because I know T.J. Watt is very, very popular and everybody wants him to be Superman. I think his age is probably an issue. He's got a lot of mileage on those tires because of the way he plays. All right, Darius Slay, 34 years old. I don't know, man. He's probably got enough left that he can be somewhat effective, but I don't think he'll be great. I don't think that he's going to find some kind of fountain of youth. Jalen Ramsey is 30 years old. He's still effective. I think he's still good on some level. Chris Boswell obviously is still one of the best players, one of the best kickers in the league at 34. I don't think that's a big deal. It's just one of those things where Cameron Johnson, the punter, he's the punter. I don't worry about the punters and the kickers. But the other guy's Miles Killebrew at 32. For his role, I think he's fine. But I do think that the Steelers made themselves older. And I don't know if that means better. That's the thing that is really going to be interesting to see is just basically how old is this team? And how much is age going to be a factor with this team? And how much is age going to hurt this team? I mean, again, I really believe that you go through and you look at every single one of these guys and, I think they all probably still have something left, but I don't know how much. And I don't know, really how much they're going to be, anywhere close to when they were at their best. Obviously, they're not going to be in their prime anymore. Obviously, they're not going to be, all pro level anymore. Obviously, all that stuff is going to be good. But to me, it feels a lot like, this is just kind of a dilemma that the Steelers have had. Are they really going all in? Are they, trying to win this year? Well, I hope so. I hope so. I hope they're going to try and win this year. Because I think that one of the biggest things is they have a bunch of draft picks and they have a bunch of salary cap room next year. They're going to be able to change the roster. So it's not like they're going all in, but you kind of have a team that's sort of you put together with the idea that you're hoping a bunch of these guys find their fountain of youth. Aaron Rodgers, key example, you signed him because you think that he's better than Justin Fields and Russell Wilson were. You basically signed him, hoping that you can squeeze one more year out of him. I don't know if you can or you can't, but I'm just telling you, that's one of those situations where I say it could work, but it also might be a disaster. Jalen Ramsey or Darius Slay, if the plan is to move one of those to safety or use some sort of combination of both of those at different times at safety and corner, I probably like that more than the idea that one of them is going to be your starting corner and one of them is going to be your slot. Although as a slot corner, I think Darius Slay or Jalen Ramsey probably would be an upgrade over the guys they had. If you think about it, I think those guys really, I feel like all of them have had, at various times in their life, very good careers and very good seasons. But what can you get out of them this year? That's going to be the biggest question to me. Jalen Ramsey, I think at one point was probably one of the best corners in the league, if not the best corner in the league. Clearly a trash talker. You kind of have to like what he does, what he brings to the table. But can he do it at that level anymore? That's the biggest question I have. Can he do it at that level anymore? There you see a picture of Aaron Rodgers. I think a question about him is very fair as well. And so to me, when you start to look at all these guys, I don't know. I kind of feel like, and I'll tell you, Jason Mackey wrote something the other day, kind of basically saying that all these moves that they've made put Tomlin on the hot seat. I mean, Tomlin's never going to be on the hot seat here, but the other part of it is he should be on the hot seat because he hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years. That's why he should be on the hot seat no matter what. And honestly, I would be of the opinion, this is the opinion I would be of. They could have a bunch of rookies out there and he should be on the hot seat. But either way, when I look at this roster and I look at the additions that they've made, I get what they were going for. I really do. I get what they were trying to accomplish. I really do. I get the idea that you're trying to get better by bringing in veteran players, by bringing in guys who, have accomplished stuff in this league, former All-Pros, all that. But I just wish I wish we could say, let's take this roster and back up 4 years. I mean, could you imagine if you had Watt 4 years ago, Heyward 4 years ago, Aaron Rodgers 4 years ago, even Robert Woods 4 years ago, Jalen Ramsey 4 years ago, Jonnu Smith 4 years ago. I mean, to me, that would be really something kind of special. Of course, it's very hard to pull that off just from the standpoint of you can't go back in time. We don't have DeLoreans. We don't have any of that good stuff. Anyway, let's let our good friend Matt Vensel's going to jump in. We'll get back to the Steelers in a little bit here, but Matt covers the Penguins for us. And you know what, Matt, we haven't talked on this show nearly enough about the offseason that the Penguins have had. So we can actually start there. What do you think led to the end of the Mike Sullivan era? And do you think that what they've done with the coaching staff since is probably the right move, right fit for this group?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the coaching change was surprising in the sense, if you zoom out and you're looking at it from afar, you're like, maybe this guy should have been let go a few years ago just based on the results. But it was surprising in the sense that both Fenway Sports Group and Kyle Dubas were really complimentary of him. But, I think in the end, it just came down to the fact that Mike Sullivan thought the Penguins were closer to maybe contending than Kyle Dubas did. It's been clear in the ensuing weeks that have passed since Mike Sullivan moved on that Kyle Dubas sees this as a longer-term rebuild than even he indicated a few months ago. So there was a disconnect there, and ultimately they agreed to part ways. And now they're going with a total youth movement. Dan Muse was a surprising hire in itself. But when you kind of look at his credentials after he was hired, he's a guy that should have been on all of our radars. He has a robust resume with player development, and he also was winning along the way. He won a Clark Cup with the Chicago Steel in the USHL. He was an assistant coach in Yale. So we'll see. You never know. He's a first-time head coach, but those who know him say he's a really hard worker. He's great with player development. And this is kind of where the Penguins are at right now. So it does make sense to bring in a coach like him.
Well, I think, the thing about it that struck me when he was hired is exactly what you just said. And that is he's a guy that's good at developing, or has a reputation as developing players. And, that would sort of signal to me that the Penguins have finally just said, we're going to acknowledge that there's a rebuild taking place and probably a bit of a youth movement.
Absolutely. And let's be honest. This all started when they traded Jake Gensel, last March. I think if I would critique anything or one thing I should say about what Kyle Dubas and the Penguins are doing is they just haven't come out and used the word rebuild. They keep saying transition. That's the word they use. I mean, I think it's an optics thing. But if you just look at their moves at this point, I mean, it's very clear what they're going through. And, we're going to find out here over the next few weeks, like, if they're really going to tear this thing down to the studs. Now, I don't see Sidney Crosby going anywhere unless he asks for it. And there's been no indications at this point that he wants to leave. But, is that going to change here, a year from now if they do trade away Brian Rust and or Rickard Raquel? So we're going to see how far this teardown is going to go. But, you look at all the moves they made to acquire picks. They just traded away Alex Nedeljkovic right before I hopped on here for a third-round pick in 2028. So this is very much a long-term rebuild. And the question is just going to be, is Sidney Crosby going to want to stay on board for it? And we don't really have an answer right now.
Well, I think that's the key is, Matt. There were some rumblings that Malkin was going to go back to Russia after this season. It sounds like he's coming back for another year.
Correct.
Tang is coming back for another year, obviously. Erik Karlsson, it sounds like they would like to move him if they could, but they might not be able to. So you're still going to have sort of that element, aren't you, at the other end of the roster?
Absolutely. And, the thing is, like, pretty much the rest of the league is trying to get better except for the Penguins. I mean, there's a few teams that are, still in a rebuild that are trying to come out of it, but pretty much like every team is trying to go for it right now except for the Penguins. So, it is an opportunity. Honestly, they're not going to say the word tank, and Sidney Crosby might have something to say about it, but this is an opportune time for them to be bad, we'll say. With everyone else not looking to be bad. And next year, the draft is supposed to be pretty strong, and it's led by a kid named Gavin McKenna, who might end up at Penn State. Penn State might land, I don't know if McKenna's a Crosby-type prospect, but certainly he's, in the same kind of conversation as prospects. So, it behooved the Penguins to position themselves to get that guy, and maybe this thing can get some jet fuel if they get a player like that in the rebuild. But that's kind of the landscape here of the league, as the Penguins are kind of going in this direction.
They have what is the number I've heard, like 30-some picks over the next 3 years or something like that? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so they just made 13 picks last weekend, and that was their most in one draft since 1994. And I just saw in their press release now with this Nedeljkovic trade that they have 28 more over the next 3 years. And, I think 16 of them are in the first 3 rounds. I mean, a lot of the picks this year were in the later rounds, but many of these picks they have coming up are, in the first half of the draft.
Right. And in hockey, that's kind of interesting in hockey because doesn't it usually take a few years for those guys to get through to have a chance to come up to play on the NHL team?
Yeah, generally. I mean, the NHL is interesting because there's so many different developmental paths. I mean, you have kids playing in junior hockey, college, Europe. There's so many different paths for them to go to get to the NHL. But, yeah, I mean, I'd say a handful of players every year, make the NHL, play in the NHL within a year of being drafted. So even though the Penguins drafted all these players, odds are we're not going to see any of them for at least a year. And for many of them, 2, 3, 4, 5 years maybe before they make it, if they make it.
I saw. Did I see it right that they had 3 first-round picks this year?
Yeah, they traded down. They had number 11 and number 12, and they traded the 12th pick to get 2 picks later in the first round.
Just looking at the reaction on social media, which again probably is not the correct thing to do when you're really trying to, figure out something. It seemed like people were a little bit underwhelmed by the guys that the Penguins picked. Was there a reason for that, or, is it just social media being social media?
Well, I mean, it comes down to the fact that, in mock drafts and, it seems like other NHL teams as well maybe didn't value these players as highly. I mean, a lot of the mock drafts had, Benjamin Kindle, their first pick. going in the 20s, and they took him in 11. And the other two guys were taken a little bit ahead of what was rejected as well. I mean, we'll see. I wrote coming into the draft that this would be a defining draft for Kyle Dubas because they had all these picks and, they were dangling guys like Brian Russ. But it really is, I mean, that is going to prove to be true because they did kind of go against convention with these picks and also by trading down. And, if Kyle Dubas and his scouts, lead scout Wes Clark, are right about these guys and they have an awesome draft, then, we're going to look back and say, okay, Kyle Dubas and Wes Clark were onto something. And, if this draft class ends up being a disaster, we're going to look back on it and say, okay, these guys overthought it. I mean, time will tell. Who knows? I know these scouts put in the work and they had conviction about the guys they picked. And, now we just got to wait a few years to see what pans out with these guys.
Are there anything, or is there anything else like on the radar that we should really be watching for? I mean, did you feel like the goalies they have are the goalies that they're going to go with this year? Could they make a move for a goalie? You just mentioned Brian Russ. I read something about how he was actually maybe out on the market. Are there some moves you think still will have to happen before the roster is what we will be watching next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were really quiet today, the first day of free agency, at least till now with the trade in Nedeljkovic. I think they have $16 million in cap space. There's not many free agents left, but Kyle Dubas came right out and said going into free agency that they weren't really going to throw a lot of money around at older players. I mean, they're looking more so to give some of the young players opportunities this year, and they'll kind of look at select veterans, maybe target restricted free agents who are younger players like 23, 24. Now they'd have to give up a pick if they were to, get one of those players. But those are the kind of players they're going to look for. But I think it's going to be interesting on a couple of fronts. One, they have all this cap space. Could we see them take on more unwanted contracts for picks like they did with Kevin Hayes last year? And then you mentioned Brian Rust. I mean, a lot of the top free agents stayed with their teams. And, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of teams that are looking to get better. So I think that puts the Penguins in a good position if they are going to try to sell a Brian Russ or Rickard Rakell. I mean, Kyle Dubas said they set a high price for them. We'll see about Carlson as well. But, if all these teams missed out on free agents and the Penguins are sitting here saying, okay, come to us, that's a lot of leverage for Kyle Dubas to potentially move one of these players. And we'll just see if, with Rust in particular, we know how much Sidney Crosby likes him and what he means to the team in the city. Is a team going to offer a compelling enough offer to get Kyle Dubas to move? That's what we're going to need to be watching here over the next few weeks.
Well, and I'll let you go on this because I promised I wouldn't keep you that long.
That's fine.
Yeah. Fenway Sports Group, there was a story, what was it, maybe 2 weeks ago, that they were looking maybe to sell the Penguins or sell their interest in the Penguins. There was discussion that maybe Mary Lemieux and Ron Burkle could get back involved. Has there been any, movement on that story? Anything going on on that front that makes it interesting or makes it sort of like this is probably something that's going to happen?
All that chatter has died down. I mean, I do believe there was some truth to the report that, Mario and Ron Burkle were kind of eyeing, maybe buying the Penguins back. But, publicly and privately, Fenway Sports Groups is saying, no, we're just selling a minority share. That news came out in January, I believe, that they're looking to raise additional capital to put into the arena, to put back into the team. I know they're trying to, redevelop around the arena. So Fenway keeps saying, look, it's just we're not selling the team. We're selling a small chair. They're reiterated that internally by sending out a memo. We'll see. Right now it looks like there's nothing happening, but you know how these ownership sales go. I mean, they kind of just pop out of nowhere. I mean, heck, when Mario sold the team a few years ago, nobody saw that one coming either. So we'll see. But that chatter has really died down over the last few weeks. That doesn't mean there's nothing popping. But, as far as I've heard from people at Fenway Sports Group, they're not interested in selling the team outright. So it kind of makes Mario's interest in the team moot.
Right, because isn't there like a little bit of a rift between him and the Fenway Sports Group? I mean, have I read that correctly?
Yeah, stemming from the sale that it's, that's still an icy relationship. But the other things too is like, I believe Mario sold the team for like $900 million. Well, team prices continue to go up and up and up. I mean, what's Fenway going to sell it for if they sell it? 1.5 billion.
Right.
Yeah. Even if they said, okay, Mario, like we're listening, like he's going to have to pay more than he gave up to get the team. So I just don't really. I'd be surprised if it happens, but I'm not entirely ruling out the possibility because you never know. You just never know. Everybody has a price, right?
That's true. Matt, thank you so much, man. And thanks for jumping on. Hopefully we'll do it again soon down the road. I know you got a lot going on, man, with everything. So keep up the great work covering the team.
Thank you. You got it, Paul. Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, brother. That is Matt Vensel. Covers the Penguins. And, of course, a lot to digest there when it comes to the Penguins. I mean, I think obviously, the stuff with the ownership group is interesting. Just from the standpoint of, I've heard a couple of different people tell me that if they could get the right price, they would be out. But the problem is it's a tough market. Getting the right price right now is a tough market, and they're not going to just sell it for nothing. And we'll see. As for the rest of it, they have a zillion picks. So to me, if they don't get better over the next 4 or 5 years, I mean, that's just a 100% on the general manager and his team of guys that are charged with developing players. The scouts and everybody evaluating players, and then the guys that developing them. You're obviously not doing a great job if you have a zillion picks over a 4-year period or a 3-year period, and they don't turn into something better. I mean, that's just that. Anyway, back to the Steelers. I think it should be said that, the big thing that I look at with their defensive backfield is you do have a guy in Joey Porter Jr. who's obviously young still and just kind of coming into his own in his prime. I think he's probably a better positioned as a number 2 corner. And so because of his experience, maybe you would have Jalen Ramsey line up and be sort of your number 1, and that might make Joey Porter Jr. even better. And you would hope that Ramsey could give you at least what Joey Porter Jr. gave you last year as the 1. But again, there's a lot of risk involved in the moves that the Steelers have made. And I think that if they don't turn out to be good, that's going to be the issue. That's going to be the issue. Is sort of their age and their inability to match up with other teams and all this stuff simply because they've got too many 30-somethings. And the other part of 30-somethings that nobody wants to talk about is, they break down sometimes and they get injuries. And if they get little injuries here and there, guess what? They're harder to recover from. So I certainly don't think they're out on the, I certainly don't think the Steelers are out of the woods. They just, it feels to me like this is their effort to try and make sure they can go out and win a playoff game. It's almost like we're going to put all these guys together, compile this roster and hope. Well, and hope that, some of these guys are still good enough to contribute. But again, I don't expect a lot out of most of these guys, to be honest. I feel like some of them are probably just a little past their prime and all that. And so to me, it feels really kind of like a situation of where we just have to, wait and see what goes on here and what happens. So that's where I'm at. That's what I would tell you is my concern with the Steelers is that all of the moves they've made for the most part has made them older, and I look at Jonnu Smith and I say, basically, it's going to be very interesting to see how he's utilized, considering they probably already have a guy that does exactly what he does. And if, all of the, what I call them, the self-appointed fake offensive gurus on social media who've been throwing around terms like 12 personnel, 13 personnel, and all this other garbage. That's wonderful. But again, if you're going to put 2 tight ends on the field, if you're going to put 3 tight ends on the field, you better be able to run the ball. And guess what? You've got 2 tight ends out of the 3 who just aren't that good at run blockers. So I just don't know how that's going to work. Nevertheless, as always, I've had a good time. And by the way, the game is always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. And it's also a place that is owned by one Archie, who's a great dude. So if you get down there, tell Archie I said hello. Tell him I sent you. Try my grilled cheese. Enjoy some really good refreshments. In fact, this holiday weekend, if you're looking for a place to go, watch some games and enjoy some fellowship, go to Archie's. Until then, have yourself a great holiday weekend.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.